Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that your life savings can no longer buy a loaf of bread. Imagine carrying a bag full of money to the market, only to find that prices have doubled by the time you arrive. This is not fiction. This is hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is one of the most devastating economic disasters a country can experience. It happens when prices rise extremely fast, often more than 50% per month, and money rapidly loses its value. When this occurs, people lose trust in their currency, savings disappear, businesses collapse, and everyday life becomes a struggle for survival. Today, we will explore three of the most terrifying hyperinflation stories in history: Weimar Germany in the 1920s, Zimbabwe in the 2000s, and Venezuela in the 2010s. Each of these countries faced different circumstances, but all suffered the same painful consequences: economic collapse, social chaos, and deep human suffering. Let's begin with Germany after World War I. In 1918, Germany lost the war. The country was economically exhausted, politically unstable, and burdened with massive debt. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was required to pay enormous reparations to the Allied powers. These payments were so large that the German government struggled to meet them. Instead of raising enough taxes or restructuring the economy, the government began printing more money. At first, it seemed like a temporary solution, but printing money without increasing production leads to one major problem: inflation. By 1921, prices began rising quickly. By 1922, inflation was out of control. And by 1923, Germany was experiencing one of the worst hyperinflations in history. At its peak, prices doubled every few days. Workers were paid twice a day so they could rush to buy goods before prices increased again. People carried wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy bread. Children played with stacks of banknotes because they were cheaper than toys. To give you an idea of how extreme it was, in 1919, $1 was worth about 4 German marks. By late 1923, $1 was worth 4.2 trillion marks. The middle class was hit hardest. Families who had saved money for years saw their savings become worthless overnight. Pensions disappeared. Life insurance policies meant nothing. Trust in the government collapsed. This economic disaster created anger, fear, and instability. Many historians believe that the trauma of hyperinflation contributed to the rise of extremist political movements in Germany later on. Eventually, the crisis ended when the government introduced a new currency called the Rentenmark and stopped printing excessive money. But the damage to society had already been done. Now let's move to Zimbabwe, one of the most shocking hyperinflation episodes in modern history. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe was already facing economic difficulties. A controversial land reform program disrupted agricultural production. Since agriculture was a major part of the economy, food production dropped sharply. At the same time, government spending increased and economic mismanagement worsened the situation. To pay debts and cover expenses, the government printed more and more money. As confidence in the economy declined, inflation began to skyrocket. By 2007, inflation was extremely high. By 2008, it became unimaginable. Zimbabwe's inflation rate reached an estimated 79.6 billion% per month in November 2008. Let that sink in. Prices were doubling approximately every 24 hours. Higher denominations, $1 million notes, 1 million Titan billion, 100 billion, even $100 trillion notes. But these notes were almost useless. People needed stacks of cash just to buy basic food items. Shops stopped accepting the Zimbabwean dollar. Many businesses closed, hospitals lacked medicine, fuel shortages were common, unemployment skyrocketed. People began using foreign currencies like the US dollar and South African rand instead of their own national currency. Eventually, in 2009, the Zimbabwean government officially abandoned its currency. Hyperinflation destroyed trust in the financial system. It wiped out savings and pensions. An entire generation saw their economic stability disappear. Even today, Zimbabwe continues to struggle with currency instability and inflation challenges. Our third example is Venezuela, once one of the wealthiest countries in South America. For many years, Venezuela relied heavily on oil exports. Oil made up the majority of government revenue. When oil prices were high, the economy grew and government spending increased. But there was a serious weakness. The economy was not diversified. It depended almost entirely on oil. In 2014, global oil prices collapsed. Suddenly, Venezuela's main source of income shrank dramatically. Instead of reducing spending or restructuring the economy, the government responded by printing more money. At the same time, price controls discouraged production. Businesses struggled. Corruption and political instability increased. Foreign investment declined. By 2016, inflation was rising rapidly. By 2018, Venezuela's inflation rate exceeded 1,000% annually. The consequences were devastating. Food shortages became widespread. Medicine became scarce. Hospitals lacked basic supplies. Crime increased. Millions of people left the country in one of the largest migration crises in modern history. The Venezuelan currency, the bolivar, lost so much value that the government removed zeros from banknotes multiple times. Still, inflation continued. Although inflation has slowed in recent years compared to its peak, the economic and social damage remains severe. Venezuela's story shows how quickly a resource-rich country can collapse if economic policy is poorly managed and public trust disappears. Looking at these three cases, we can see common patterns. Excessive money printing. Governments print money to pay debts or finance spending without real economic growth. Loss of confidence. When people stop trusting the currency, they rush to spend it before it loses value, which increases inflation even more. Economic shocks. War, falling exports, political instability, or collapse of major industries can trigger inflation. Weak institutions. Lack of strong financial systems and poor governance make crises worse. Hyperinflation is not just about numbers, it is about trust. Once trust in money disappears, rebuilding it is extremely difficult. Behind every statistic are real people, parents unable to feed their children, workers paid with money that becomes worthless within hours, retirees losing lifelong savings, businesses shutting down, families forced to migrate. Hyperinflation destroys the middle class. It increases inequality. It creates social unrest. And sometimes, it changes the political future of entire nations. The stories of Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela remind us that money is not just paper. It is trust. It represents stability, confidence, and economic order. When governments lose control of inflation, the consequences can be catastrophic. Entire economies collapse. Social systems break down. Political systems become unstable. Hyperinflation teaches one powerful lesson. Sound economic policy, responsible governance, and public trust are essential for a stable society. History shows us what happens when those foundations crumble, and that is why hyperinflation remains one of the most terrifying economic disasters in human history.